Hi, let me ask you a question. Do all persistent classes have their own database identity? To answer this question, you need to understand the difference between entities and value types. So let's try to understand it with the help of an example. Let's say a user has a home address and also a billing address, for which you have a database table called users with the columns to store data of the home address and the billing address. Now, in your object model, you could use the same approach representing two addresses as 6 data attributes of string type in a user class. But you'd rather like to have a separate address class to store only address-specific details in it, and use the home address and billing address attributes of type address to access the user's address-specific details from it. This is a better design from a code reuse perspective. Now, you might be asking that why did we have this identifier attributes in this user class? Why not in the address class? And this is an excellent question. And the answer to that question is that we would do it if the application that we were working on cared only about uniquely identifying a user and did not have any significance of the identity of an address. And the objects that have their own database identity are objects of entity type, which makes the user here an entity type. And the objects that have no database identity are objects of value type, which makes the address here a value type. And because the value type objects have no database identity, they depend on the identity of the entities they belong to. So their life cycle also depends on the entities that they belong to. For example, if the user object here is deleted, all the address objects depending on it will be deleted as well. Also, they cannot be referenced by other entities. They are owned only by the entities that they belong to. But objects of entity type could be referenced by other entities. And in case I forgot to mention, but I'm sure you could imagine, that the classes like string and integer that we get from Java are the most simple value type classes. Now, another important thing you have to understand here is that if you're working on an application that cares about uniquely identifying an address, that in that case, this address would be an entity type. And it will require an identifier attribute to uniquely identify its identity. So it's a decision for you to make for your specific application that whether an object is an entity type or a value type. And to decide on whether an object is an entity type or a value type for your specific application, you could ask a question to yourself that does the database identity of an object matters for your application? And if the answer is yes, then the object is an entity type. If the answer is no, then it's a value type. Now, the question we asked at the beginning of this session was, do all persistent classes have their own database identity? I'm sure you know the answer by now. The answer is no, they don't. Sometimes you have an object model which has more classes than the number of corresponding database tables to store data for them.